Welcome to this episode of Eureka. We are going to have a very interesting and a very exciting conversation with Dr. R.S. Paroda, who is the founder chairperson for Trust for Advancement of Agricultural Sciences, and he has been a former Director General of Indian Council for Agriculture Research. We are going to have a very wonderful discussion. Do you know, there was a time when people used to say that in India people eat from ship to lip. That was the situation, and today we have surplus production. What challenges are there in agriculture sciences? We are going to discuss in this episode. Before that, we will take a quick look at his brief profile. Keep watching Eureka.
Dr. Rajendra Singh Paroda is well known for his versatility. As an agricultural research scientist, he also ranks as a visionary and architect of several research institutions. Currently, he is the chairman of the Trust for Advancement of Agricultural Science at New Delhi that is devoted to linking science with society. Born on August 28, 1942 at Ajmer in Rajasthan, Dr. Paroda obtained his PhD from the prestigious Indian Agricultural Research Institute at Delhi, where he worked under the able guidance of late Dr. A.B. Joshi on the genetic architecture of wheat. After obtaining his doctorate in 1968, he studied at the University of Wales, Aberystwyth, UK, on a Commonwealth postdoctoral fellowship. Dr. Paroda has significant research contributions in the field of plant breeding and genetic resource management, as evidenced by the release of 10 improved crop varieties at the national level. During the period 1994 to 2001, as Director General, Indian Council of Agricultural Research and Secretary, Department of Agricultural Research and Education with Government of India, Dr. Paroda ably spearheaded and modernized the national agricultural research system in the country. Under his leadership at ICAR, more than 30 new institutions were created in different sectors of agriculture like crops, horticulture, livestock, fishery and agriculture engineering. Dr. Paroda is well known for initiating and strengthening many visionary programs and projects at the national and international level. The prestigious National Agriculture Technology Project of the World Bank was developed by him to reorient agricultural, research, education and extension system to meet new challenges. He is also the main architect of one of the world's largest and most modern National Green Bank, the second largest in the world today. National Agricultural Science Centre located at Pusa. Dr. Paroda has published 250 papers in journals of repute and authored 10 books. He has received several national and international awards and recognitions, noted among them being the Padma Bhushan in 1998 and the Norman Borlaug Award in 2006.
Thank you, sir. It's a very wonderful opportunity to interact with you, a eminent person who have worked with famous personalities like Norman Borlaug and Dr. M.S. Swaminathan. You have made India food sufficient. I mean, along with a lot of other people who have spent all their life in agriculture sciences. So let me start with this question. I mean, you would have had more than about 3-4 decades of agriculture research experience with you, right? So if I ask you, what was your major contribution to agriculture research? What would be your...
Well, when you ask about my major contribution, first had been in the research which is plant breeding, and in the field of plant breeding I had been working in forage crops.
Okay.
And released about 10 varieties at national level, and some of them had been unique for multi-cut purpose for increased productivity and by not planting seed every time, whether it is for sorghum or whether it is for oats. And then also I had been working in wheat and came out with genetic architecture of yield and yield related traits, which have helped in improving the productivity in wheat to a considerable
See,
extent.
you were talking about forage crop, basically crops which work as a feed for cattle
For
and
the
other
cattle,
bovine animals,
animal
right?
sector.
Why is a problem? I mean, one can understand that food is a problem because we were growing less and maybe people are increasing. But where is the fodder issue comes in?
Look here, animal sector contributes about 40% to agricultural GDP. And out of animal sector, 60% expenditure is on feed and fodder crops.
Okay.
So if you have to, and we have achieved also white revolution. So if you have to reduce the cost on availability of feed and the fodder, then you have to go for high yielding varieties and better agronomic practices so that you can reduce the cost for the livestock farmers.
See, when you talk about a food crop and food crop increment, let's say, for example, grains, one is looking at producing more amount of grain from one single plant. So, if you're looking at something like a forage plant, what would be our desirability?
Desirability there is firstly fast growing, higher biomass, and if possible have more frequent cuts available.
Okay, so with one
So
plant
that
itself, we can
availability increases,
increases, okay.
and then it should have also better digestibility, so that animal is able to utilize it, and more of it is for then better animal and milk production.
Okay, so this question of, for example, better digestibility, how do you actually find out? I mean, what kind of methods you use to identify that this is better, that is better? How do you find out actually?
We call is in vitro method, in vivo method. So lab techniques are there which have to be then verified through in vivo by feeding trials of those particular materials and looking at the animal growth from
Okay.
time to time.
So you actually feed them and then test the animals
Test
in
them
terms
and
of
then
that.
work out all, and you have to work in a multidisciplinary mode with the animal nutritionist, biotechnologist, the agronomist, the breeders. So it is
That's a very interesting thing. One of your work you said is essentially developing crops, particularly forage crops, which are feed to
Plant breeding.
animals. The other area that people say your major contribution is establishing the agricultural system in India. So can you say something about it? I mean, why do you think it was very important? What were the challenges that you faced in those days?
In fact, let me go back to my postdoc research period in United Kingdom, and I was trying to return back, and my professor asked me one very straightforward question that Raj, many before you have come and gone back, but we don't hear from them back as to what they are doing and how they are performing, and what's the reason why they do not do. And sometimes I am told that there are no facilities, and they don't find environment so conducive for research. So that I took as a challenge.
Okay.
I said, nobody is going to come and create facilities and give you in plate. You have to yourself do it and work, and starting from my first career, I worked and created lab facilities, field facilities, which were to be judged as best in the university. Every visitor would come and see it, and we got the first ICR Team Research Award.
Okay. Okay.
So not the award for yourself,
But it's for the team.
For the team,
For-
for
for-
others. And then when I came to serve as director, National Bureau of Plant Genetic Resources, we were having lot of collections of very valuable materials of different crop plants, but we didn't have gene bank.
Okay.
So it was a challenge, and there was not much money available, and also I had problem of getting land. But then with the help of USAID, which I could negotiate, get about 25 million US dollar grant at that time, 1986-87, and created the gene bank, which is today number second in best gene bank in the
Very,
world.
very important point. Keep watching Eureka. We'll take a very short break. Welcome back to Eureka, and we are having a very exciting and a very informative conversation with Dr. R.S. Paroda, who is currently the chairman for the Trust for Advancement of Agricultural Sciences. And before the break, we were talking about the gene bank that he established in 1986. There were not very many people who were talking about gene bank. How this idea came about, and why did you thought it was very important for India to establish such a bank?
Look here, for any genetic improvement in crop plants, you need to have good variability. And for that, you must have best possible collections of genetic resources that are available within India, or you import them from elsewhere in the world. And if you have that strength, then you are building this foundation for posterity.
Because this is a very important point, I suppose, because many people think that a gene bank is like, stamp collection. I mean, it's for fun that you have
No.
collected and put it like, a nice exhibition. You think gene bank are a very key part of establishing agriculture research, right?
This is the future, and that's why not only we established the gene bank for plants. After I was Director General of ICR, we established gene bank for animals,
Okay.
gene bank for fish collection in Lucknow, which was inaugurated by the then Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee. Gene bank for microbial organisms of importance to agriculture, and gene bank of important insects and pests. So you have also not all harmful, but also some useful
Pests, okay.
insects in the nature, which balance. So you need to have all this variability for future sustainability of our agriculture system.
Okay. Now let's shift to a major area where your contribution. That's a time when you are a young person. You grew up with this institution. That's around 1960s.
Yeah.
I mean, people used to say that India was living from ship to lip. The ship has to berth in some port, and then the food grains have to be unloaded. Only then the hunger will go away.
Right.
You can actually supply food grains to people. I mean, maybe it's a bit of exaggeration, but kind of that was the situation.
No, that was a reality, and we were importing almost to the level of 10 million tons of food, and we didn't have money to buy. So we had to take it on loan under PL 480, and we were paying it till almost 1995. So it is a fact that you had a time when people even predicted that India is going to succumb to the pressure of its own population increase, because it cannot otherwise provide food,
Okay.
and people will not be able to live. So from era of that level where we were called begging bowl, we have come to a level of not only self-sufficiency but self-pride to the nation, because I recollect Indira Gandhi had come and said, when we were just sowing the seeds of Green Revolution, and she went to US and begged for food, and we needed food and it was denied. So said that you do anything but not let your leaders go and beg for food.
Okay.
So that kind of self-pride today we have, and I recollect when we celebrated 50th year of independence, the then President R.K. Narayanan in Central Hall of Parliament, where I was also a witness, he said that two major achievements, if we can, cite during the independence period, then one is the self-sufficiency in food grain. And second is doubling our life
Expectancy.
span from 32 to 64.
Yeah.
Both are related to agricultural growth. Without food, without good nutrition, This would have not been possible.
It's an important point, but then a lot of people today are not very convinced about green revolution. People say today's problems of agriculture, excessive use of pesticides or reliance on chemical fertilizers, or even sometimes exaggeratedly, for example, prevalence of alleged cancer in some places, to the green revolution. As a person who has been part of this revolution right from its sowing seed to its maturity, how would you respond to this criticism of green revolution?
Look here, anyone can criticize. If there had not been green and white revolution, we would not have been so confident today to criticize it. We would have been still struggling. And today you are still having a major problem of population growth. India, despite the growth decline from 2.8% at that time to almost now 1.2%, though it is a decline, but the population base is so large that we are adding one Australia every year.
One Australia population every year.
15 to 16 million people every year you are adding. From where you will feed? If you don't have, Dr. Borlaug used to say, if you didn't have the dwarf genes and these wheats, you would have needed 3 times more area to produce the wheat which we today are producing.
Okay.
From where you will get this area? And then the question is not only of now today food, it is a question of nutrition security, which is a major challenge for us. We still have poverty around 20%. We need to provide economic access to food. We have produce and we have physical access, but that is a socio-economic concern, how to increase income of people so that they have better buying power. Second is that you have to have better nutrition. The children below 5 years of age who are malnourished are maximum by number today in India than anywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
So you need nutrition. You need to diversify your food basket. Why green revolution is being blamed is because we went in for approaches which possibly would have not been right and led to over exploitation of resources, natural resources, water, rice wheat system of production needing more water. But they are more assured, and the government support was also for cereals. So farmers were more assured for selling them back. If they produce something different, then that support would not be available. So the market forces, and then you have other technologies, but farmers are also used to now free water, free electricity. Then why would they go for micro irrigation? You have technology, and then you are lifting water from underground, producing these crops, whereas you could go in for more sustainable production systems. So it is not right to blame. Since we have now got buffer stock and we are even exporting country, then it is very easy to say that even organic farming can feed us. But how much organic manure or fertilizer you can provide compared to 25 million tons of nutrients that we are using? We are not having organic manure or fertilizer, if we want, is not even 5% today. For 20 years we are promoting it. So we should have a balanced approach.
Okay.
And our farmers are smallholders. 80% farmers are smallholders. They need support. They would therefore require technologies by which you can increase production and you can reduce cost on inputs, but they need to be linked to the market.
Yeah.
For better income. For this doubling of farmers' income would not simply be possible unless they are also made capable to link themselves directly to the market.
Interesting point, and Dr. M.S. Swaminathan talks about moving from green revolution to the next stage, evergreen revolution. We will have a discussion about this and also about what challenges lies ahead. Keep watching Eureka. We'll have to take a very short break. Keep watching Eureka. Welcome back to Eureka, and we are having a very engaging and a very interesting conversation with Dr. R.S. Paroda. You had a very fortunate situation of working with and also under Dr. M.S. Swaminathan. Can you tell us something about that legend? I mean, that's he has been a very important figure for modern India.
Well, any praise for Dr. Swaminathan would not be enough. He is my mentor. He was my teacher, and he had been my well-wisher all through. We were just students, joined our PhD program here when he was head of the division of genetics, and the seeds of green revolution were being sown. I am yet to come across a person who cares for young generation
Okay.
and young scientists. He would like to be in touch with each and everyone, the kind of humility he has, the kind of vision he has, the kind of leadership which he has demonstrated to work in team and encourage others. Especially even when I was PhD student, he would come to the field and would watch us whether we were comfortable and working in the field and what kind of work we were doing. He will chat with us almost every day. This you don't see, and this I think was a big learning process for us. And when I came back from UK, he even came to my room and was sitting and talking and telling that let me tell you that we have got a very good feedback from Professor Hugh Rees, with whom you worked there, who was FRS, and he said that if you have students of the kind you have sent here like Raj, you don't need to send them for post graduation
Okay.
and postdoctoral research. So he said, I'm proud that Pusa Institute's name is now
Very,
recognized.
very interesting.
So he's a person who has the great ability to articulate.
This brings in a very important point. I mean, see, people like you who initially joined this institute way back in 60s or early 70s, came from rural background, from agriculture background. You personally knew agriculture, your family was doing agriculture. Perhaps even after you joined here, your relatives were in agriculture. But today things have changed. You know, people who are coming into agriculture research perhaps are not coming from their experience in the field. When you became Director General of ICAR, right? I mean, how did you tackle this situation? Did you thought it was an important challenge or not?
In fact, we did realize because all of our universities have been established on land grant system in rural areas with lot of land, and so that you get better experience while learning. You also practice agriculture. But then, though they were based in rural areas, eventually the shift in terms of students was from rural to urban side. So this was a real challenge, and we thought that it's okay, because it's not that we have to have a silver line, rural versus urban for agriculture, but they need to be exposed. So in our course curricula program, we try to bring in 6 months rural work experience for graduate students, so that they would go and work, and we provide still ICAR provides the fellowship to them for going and working and staying in villages with farmers and for 6 months learning. So that is one way.
That's a way you have.
Because even today we don't even have agriculture as a subject in schools. So our children don't know when they are brought to the museum and we ask them, do you know where potato grows? Is it above plant or above soil or below soil? Many children don't even know that.
Now, this brings into a very important question. I mean, for the expanding country with the evolution of Green Revolution, we need a much more stronger institutional arrangement. And you have
Yeah.
been an important person who has established. Can you tell us about your?
Yeah, as I told you in the beginning also that we need to have our own, because charity begins at home, what I believe. And uh, we need to create the environment ourselves. And I am a strong believer that unless you have best environment, you cannot also expect better output from your scientists. So right from beginning, I had this objective of creating best infrastructure facilities in the institutions and more institutions, because if green revolution we had, Borlaug told me once that green revolution in India was because political support from the top. Prime Minister Nehru said everything else can wait but not agriculture. Then we had the best institution like Pusa Institute, from where we studied and graduated, and then the best hard-working farmers. So unless you have best institutions of this kind, so I during my period I think created with the help of the government, and I was lucky to have that support from all our ministers, and we could convince them. 30 institutions were created.
Okay.
From 70, now we have more than 100 institutions. And in all important areas, and if those institutions were not there, possibly today you would not have that much advancement in agriculture in those fields. So you start creating those facilities. So now our maize production in last 1 decade have doubled. Just because single cross hybrids were in the public sector, then private sector also came in. We also came out with the plant breeders and farmers' right, because they wanted the IPR for their inventions. So we said, okay, we'll provide you opportunities.
Very, very important and very interesting point. And there was a time when India was poverty ridden, famine ridden, and very under malnourished. Food was not available. You have to stand in long queues to even procure your one breakfast or one lunch. Today, we are self-sufficient in agriculture, in our food grain production. Nutrition have increased, though we have to go miles ahead. This is possible because of tireless work of people like Dr. M. S. Swaminathan and like our guest, Dr. R. S. Padodra, and many others, and like institutions like Indian Council for Agricultural Research. Keep watching Eureka. We'll come back with another interesting conversation next week. Keep watching Eureka.